Okay, welcome everyone to this seminar on demographic training for the 21st century. My name is Stan Becker. I'm at Johns Hopkins University here in Baltimore, Maryland. So the IUSSP president asked me to organize this session. I've been very concerned about the decline of formal demographic training in the US. For example, there are probably only 2 or 3 universities where one can learn stable population and multi-state models. Many new areas have come to take their place for spatial methods and agent-based modeling. So it's time to take stock and see what demographic training for the rest of the 21st century will look like. So with the help of the IUSSP leaders, I put together and recruited a younger generation to give us their perspective on this, with a speaker representing each of the 4 continents: Latin America, Africa, Europe, and Asia. And we'll go in that order. So first will be our talk from Vanessa Dilego, who graduated from Cedeplar in Brazil and is now at Wittgenstein, and has presented on healthy years of life in session earlier today, I guess, or anyway, earlier that I listened to. So we'll start with Vanessa's recording.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the session organizers for inviting me to present on the perspective from Latin America. It is such a great pleasure. At the same time, a huge challenge. And I think one of the main reasons for this is because of the diversity that we have as a region. So I think it's very interesting. I really enjoyed this map because it shows how diverse the region is, but it's usually seen as either one block, or when we call it Latin America and the Caribbean, or people know where is Brazil and Mexico, but we know that the region as a whole is much more than this, and it's very, very diverse and very heterogeneous. We have over 50 centers throughout the region. I just put here some of the main ones, and also those that were not only strictly demography, called demography programs, but also population studies, population and development. So we have just lots of centers that are spread throughout the geographic region, and each has their own specificity. So of course, I won't have time because of the time constraint to really do justice to each one of these centers, and also to the role that we have of specific scholars in promoting the knowledge in the region, and also putting the word out there. So I would just, as a strategy, I try to brainstorm a little bit with my other fellow colleagues who are from the region and they're spread throughout the world on things that I could raise today. And I really wanted to start with this aspect of the diversity. But we do have some aspects in common, and one of them is, of course, the dramatic demographic and epidemiological transition. So we were busy doing a very fast, very dramatic transition. That's one of the most, it's just very, very steep when we see this total fertility rate and how it declines and how fast it does, and how quickly we catch up with the European part of the world in terms of this transition. And as we know, this has a lot of consequences, and we're dealing with a lot of them as we speak. And this, of course, also has consequences for the dramatic aging process. So we will have an old age dependency ratio that will soon resemble some of the regions in Italy, which is currently the oldest population in the world. So in terms of percentage of the population that's aged 65 and plus. So a process that is usually done in 100 or 200 years, depending on the region of the world, we will be doing in 50 or 100 years. So this is one of the just a topic that I wanted to put as the issues that will become very challenging, that are already challenging, but will become even more challenging, and how in my view, the demographic training should be connected to some of these topics. And amidst getting busy and doing one of the fastest transition in the world in terms of demographic shifts, we were also doing this in a very in a turmoil, in the moment of social and political unrest. So amidst this moment from the 1960s to the 1990s, not only most of those centers in demography that I showed you a few slides back were founded, and they were founded amidst dictatorships and military regimes or internal conflicts. So we do also have that in common. It's just pretty recent if you think about it in our history. And of course, this influenced most of these demographic centers in terms of the topics that sometimes are dealt with. So this is definitely something that characterizes this region. And so we have those that diversity, that heterogeneity, but also those things in common. And we will also share some of these challenges. They will also be common challenges. And I would like to translate these challenges into 4 main topics. Of course, there are many other, but I would like to concentrate on 4 topics that I think will be crucial for demographic training to focus on in order to translate the information we have available into effective policy tools, and also to use them to advance knowledge in the demographic field. So as I showed you, the transition has been so fast-paced, and with it, it has not been followed by an increase, for instance, in the healthy portion of the population. So over the past 20 years, the region has seen a huge rise in obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and other non-communicable diseases. And this is very costly, and it has a tremendous toll on the population. So it is very crucial to strengthen training in aging and health with a focus on applying demographic methods to health prevalence use of health surveys, to explore the richness that we also have in terms of biomarkers and individual level data that are more and more available to push this agenda, but also to train the future and current demographers in knowing how to appropriately use this information so that we can mitigate some of the lacks that we have in terms of information with those surveys. Another aspect which is also widely debated, and we have so many great demographers working on this, which is violence. So we know that the region is one of them, hosts some of the most violent countries in the world. And this has a very huge toll, not only when we think about demographic shifts, but also in socioeconomic consequences. And it is very important because we know that violence really affects men in particular, when we think about the magnitude of these effects, and also at specific ages. So when we look at the shape of mortality in these countries, it is very different from other countries. And I think it's also important that we understand how violence has an impact in understanding those shapes, but also not only the consequences that we already know, but also the demographic impact that they have. And also, let's not forget, even though the focus is usually on male deaths and homicides that are more linked to male deaths, we also have a huge violence against women, So violence against women has a different type of toll and different type of impact because it will go into the health part a lot, but we also have femicide. So it's just a mere aspect of being murdered because of the characteristic of being a woman. And this is also very important in the region. So when we discuss gender differences in this region, we also should never forget when we're using this as a research agenda, but also when we're training demographers, the impact of femicide on training. And of course, I just wanted to raise the awareness that with COVID, this even became even more important. And sometimes we really need to focus on developing tools or using better the tools that we have to assess these issues. The other aspect I would like to touch upon is race and ethnicity. So I just put here some examples from Brazil and Peru, but of course there are many other initiatives that try to use now even big data or link the data that we have in order to make a better use of racial and ethical information. So even though sometimes it's available, it's not very widely used. And I really think this is key because to deal with race and ethnicity questions, to push this in terms of having consistent and longitudinal information that we can compare across years. We have to remember that the indigenous population has less access to health services. 50% of the indigenous adults over 35 years of age suffer from type 2 diabetes. It's just already understood that the health demands that this population has is very different. The life expectancy is lower than the average population. The infant mortality is higher. So it's not just a simple subgroup of the population. We're talking about a very important parcel of the population to which we should push more how to integrate the demographic methods in order to understand the subgroup of the population. So sometimes we push it more to understand specific differences like between women and men, and not so much and socioeconomic groups, but not so much trying to really make the effort of integrate race and ethnicity into the agenda. Of course, we have many demographers from the region that do this, that push this, but I really think it's important that more and more, as we have different tools, that we should focus on that. And also, as a last topic, I wanted to touch upon the issue of migration. I think we're changing a lot the patterns of migration in the issue, in the region, sorry. Of course, we've seen what's happened with the Venezuela's exodus in 2019, but it's not only that. I think it's more the impacts of internal migration. So understanding and measuring these impacts. So interregional migration is becoming increasingly important in the region. So this understanding of how migration happens is also changing. And this should also be also something that needs to be incorporated in training, especially because, as a matter of simplicity, we tend to exclude migration, or of course to assume that net migration is zero because of our sometimes of our assumptions, but this is becoming more and more of an issue. And I would just like to finish thanking you everyone, and also the session organizers again, and to leave you with a saying from a very wise professor I had. So if you can't be a bridge, let us at least not be dynamite. So to really harness the efforts to understand what are the challenges in the region. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'm very open to discussing more of these perspectives with you.
Thank you, Vanessa. If anyone has a urgent question, a clarification, you can ask it now. Otherwise, we'll be holding our discussion until the end after our discussant. I'll give 20 seconds or so. And in general, you can put questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I will recognize you. Okay, so we'll, yes, Mayanka.
Thank you, sir. And Vanessa, it was an excellent presentation. So I just have one small question. Whatever like the presentation that you made, you talked about violence and you talked about gender differentials, racial, ethnic differentials. Most of these questions are somewhere centered around sociology. And like Professor Stan Becker right in the beginning was mentioning that, you know, he's concerned whether, you know, demography is eventually going to become a subfield of economics or statistics or maybe sociology, let's say. So in that perspective, how do you think, you know, I mean, where do you place all of these developments in demography in Latin America in terms of, you know, the formal, I would say like the training courses that we have, the basics of demography?
Thanks. That's a great question. Yes, it was such a broad session. I was unsure where to focus. I think that I focused on the pressing topics that I think we need to focus on our training, but I'm also very keen on formal demography. And I think that, so the issue is we have lots of methods that are very particular, very characteristic of demography. So for instance, the indirect estimation techniques developed by many prominent formal demographers like William Brass and others, precisely to deal with the issue of when you have uncertainty in the information or a lack of information. So I think that we should strengthen the use of those methods, but with the focus on this group. So for instance, strengthen more the use of specific techniques we have in demography, like indirect techniques, but including ethnicity, because we usually do this for when we have lack of data, but sometimes we have a bit of a data, but they're not enough, or we don't trust them fully. So maybe we should, use the tools we already have, but look into segments of the population which we haven't looked upon because we don't have information. Another thing is we also have very good techniques in terms of correcting and looking into age patterns, and we don't do this so much with health because we already put this as inputs into methods like Sullivan method and everything, but we don't use our techniques to further explore beforehand the age pattern of health. So I think this was in the way that I was this is the direction where I'm in with my talk, like that we explore the techniques we have and strengthen them, but to look into these topics which are very, very challenging, instead of only relying on new and upcoming tools to deal with what we have. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. So next we'll have a talk by Bawa Ayaga, who is at the Regional Institute of Population Studies in Ghana, and he has worked extensively in Navango project and the in-depth network of longitudinal and demographic surveillance systems. So we'll hear the recording from Bawa.
Good morning to all of you, and welcome to the session on demographic training in the 21st century. My name is Ayaga Bawa. I'm a professor at the Regional Institute for Population Studies at the University of Ghana. I would start my presentation by offering a few reflections. Demographic training in Africa started in the early 70s with the establishment by the UN a number of regional training institutes to provide demographers for the Africa region. These institutes covered both Francophone and Anglophone Africa. Their main remit at the time was to provide technical capacity to undertake and analyze census data to help in understanding changing dynamics and the structure of populations. However, the focus of the training programs changed after the 1994 population conference, when the emphasis at the time shifted to issues related to sexual and reproductive health. And so most training programs began to tailor their programs to respond to the changing needs of the time. So in that respect, the technical aspects of the training were emphasized, making the programs to do the intellectual rigor that they once had. Indeed, Ron Lee in 2001 argued that formal demography became less emphasized, with more emphasis on individual decisions about demographic behavior. In his view, demography provides the analytical link between individuals at the micro level and population at the macro level. Therefore, I would argue that demography provides the STEM. So the core of the training demography is the technical aspect. And in fact, that is what distinguishes the discipline from others. So what should be the emphasis in terms of demographic training in the 21st century? I would argue that formal demography should remain an important area of inquiry. Indeed, it constitutes the core of the discipline and distinguishes us from other disciplines. The discipline examines the relationship between fertility, mortality, and migration, and how these together shape the structure and growth of population. So whilst I would argue that formal demography remains an important area and continual area of inquiry in training programs, there are In fact, other topical areas that have in recent time gained significance and should also be emphasized. In particular, the whole area of environment, population and environment has become very topical. And that has become very topical because of the whole issue of climate change, which is affecting most parts of the world, including sub-Saharan Africa. Another area of emphasis is the whole issue of urbanization. In fact, sub-Saharan Africa is reported to be experiencing the fastest rate of urbanization in the world. And so this is an area that we need to pay attention to in terms of the training in the discipline also. But related to this whole issue of urbanization is the issue of migration. Indeed, the high rate of urbanization that we are experiencing in the region has to do more with rural urban migration. So you have a lot more people moving from rural deprived areas and congregating in a few urban centers, thereby swelling the numbers and increasing the population in those urban centers. But it's not just rural urban migration. We also beginning to see the whole issue of south-south migration. So you see people moving across different countries in the region, in sub-Saharan Africa. And so that is an area that we need to pay attention to as we provide training in the 21st century. Again, the whole issue of international migration has also assumed important dimensions in more recent times. We have seen how droves of people are beginning to move across, in particular the Mediterranean, and there's no day that passes without information that we hear in the media about people attempting to cross the Mediterranean into Southern Europe and beyond. And so this whole phenomena is something that has to engage training programs in the region. Another area of importance is the whole issue of aging. More recent data, and especially the 2020 round of censuses, are beginning to show that aging in the region is becoming a reality. We are beginning to see increasing levels of high life expectancy over time. And so this is an important area that has to engage the attention of training programs. In fact, the whole issue of aging has consequences for labor force, it has consequences for social security administration, and so we need to pay a lot of attention to this area of inquiry as well. The whole issue of changes in the causes of death and shifts in disease patterns, thereby leading to change in the age structure of mortality is a whole area of inquiry that needs to engage academics in the field of demography. We are beginning to see increasing levels of NCDs, even within the context of continuing levels of infectious disease. So this is shifting the patterns of deaths in ways that are very unique in our part of the world. And so this is a whole area that we must pay attention to. We also are beginning to see a lot of social inequalities in terms of gender, in health, inequalities in terms of social class, and these are beginning to widen in ways that are of great concern. And so we must begin to also pay attention in this area. The whole issue of family formation and cohabitation have evolved over time, and there's the need for training programs to also begin to pay attention to these issues as we move forward. We cannot talk about training in demography without looking at the whole issue of data science. Data science has become an important area that's our training programs must begin to interrogate the whole issue of big data. There's a lot more data than was the case when most of the demographic training institutes was established in the 1970s. We see a lot more data, and so new techniques for mining that data is critical. And so the whole issue of data science is very critical for inquiry in the area of demographic training. Another area that we must begin to look at has to do with the issue of cohort studies and techniques for analyzing longitudinal data. More and more, we are beginning to see the establishment of sites, especially the mushrooming of the demographics and health surveillance sites across the entire continent. And these sites are beginning to produce longitudinal data, but the methods and techniques have not been well developed in this part of the world. So the data are underutilized, and so training programs must begin to put emphasis in this area and to provide training and skills for students and researchers to be able to take advantage of the large data that is beginning to emerge in the area of longitudinal studies. The issue of maternal, child, and reproductive health continue to remain important in this part of the world, and so we must continue to engage our minds as we provide training in the field of population studies and demography. And we've seen a whole series of programs in the area of family planning, because fertility has continued to remain quite high in most countries in the region, and so family planning remains an important area of inquiry. But and most of the new programs are emerging, are beginning to talk about refocusing family planning, and so again, training in the field has to begin to look at this whole issue of family planning and how we can take advantage of, emerging thinking in the field, and then provide our students with training. Finally, I will end by saying that training in demography has remained relevant as it was in the 70s, even more so as more data has become much more available. We know that the training programs have also evolved over time, and so we are beginning to interrogate new and more areas that did not engage our minds. And of course, there's the need to continue to respond to these new areas that are evolving in the field, and to be able to equip students to be able to deal with the changing programs and activities that are emerging in the area. But even as we avert our minds to looking at new and emerging areas, we should not lose sight of the core of the discipline. We need to continue to emphasize the technical aspects. As I indicated, formal demography constitute the core of the discipline. And so even as we begin to enter into new areas of inquiry, we must continue to emphasize the core of the discipline, the formal relationships between the various demographic phenomena, especially the key components of demographic change as it relates to fertility, mortality, and migration, and how these interplay to shape the structure and growth of populations in the field. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is there any quick question of clarification? Yes, Mayanka?
Thank you, sir. So I just had one question. It was that, sir, you mentioned about refocusing on family planning. Were you talking about any kind of interventional study or just MCH, just like, pursuing some data analysis and MCH and data collection?
I think both. I think there's a need for, Stan, am I supposed to respond?
Yes, please.
Yes, I think both. Both, we need to think, we still need to think about new interventions in the area of family planning. I know there are a few interventions that are beginning to happen, especially related to, traditional and traditional methods of family planning. So I think there are opportunities to conduct new interventions, and also to take advantage of data that is available to be able to have a better handle on family planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next we'll have Mayanka Ambade, who is at the International Institute for Population Studies in Mumbai, India, and she'll give she works in economic demography and aging, and she'll give a perspective from Asia. Mayanka.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Am I audible?
A very good evening to everyone present, and I'm incredibly thankful to IUSSP for organizing this session and providing a chance to talk about demographic training from Asia. So as we all know that besides health, poverty, and hunger problems, currently Asia is riddled with humanitarian crises such as migration from the Central Asian countries. In August 2021, nearly 2.2 million Afghan refugees fled their country, and about 3.5 million migrants had to leave their homes and travel within their country. Unemployment, polarization, political transformations have been noted in most of the Asian countries in the past decade. But at the same time, corporate developments and business opportunities have increased. Technology, financial, and educational startups are growing, corporate houses are using artificial intelligence to trace the need and choice of public largely, and at the same time, social connectivity is at its height with social media. So in this context, let's talk about how democracy can contribute to it, and what are the perspectives on this from the Asian nations. So if we note, then we understand that population change lies at the heart of all of these positive as well as negative developments in Asia in the past decade. Like journalist Martin Wolf of the Financial Times stated, that population is the most important issue confronting humanity in the 21st century. So studies from Asian demography have come a long way from accounting for population and addressing the causes and consequences of population parameters through methodological innovations or theories. So we are now focusing on exploring new demographic issues which are interdisciplinary in nature, such as aging, gender, social inequalities, etc. So we can say that we have truly moved beyond the demography. And demographers from Asia and all those who are interested in Asia are doing an excellent job at exploring the issues. But as we know that studying demography in Asia has always been challenging because of the vastness and the variety of its population and the limited availability of data. So a very important point of discussion that this panel has given a platform to is, how should we design a course to teach demography in Asia so that the demographers are trained enough to manage these challenges of studying demography here? And to also equip the students and provide them exposure to all of the latest developments in our field so that they truly understand where the subject is headed. In this context, I think that organizational structure is of prime importance. So organizational structure is actually the strength of the subject. And currently, compared to Europe and US, demography is taught in a handful of places only in India and other surrounding Asian countries, but I would rather focus more on South Asian countries in this context. So, in fact, some of the universities which taught demography from Asia have actually shut down, which shows the declining popularity of the subject here. However, we have to put our efforts towards improving the popularity among the masses. And this is incredibly necessary for administrative attention, attracting scholars, and building funding opportunities. So propagation of the subject in universities is very, very essential. And this is also going to provide proper employment opportunities to the students of demography here. But if I may state that just improving employment opportunities through increasing popularity in universities is not only insufficient, but also, I would say, unsustainable for the subject, because we have to make our need felt in the growing areas. It is important that we are able to contribute to the growing market needs of labor. And so therefore, like, for example, I can state that demographic perspective can be incredibly useful when it comes to, let's say, market research and in altogether the future of marketing. So we need to introduce niche courses like business demography, then political demography, demography for the pharmaceuticals, and all of these courses do exist, but we have to make them more comprehensive so that we not only have like an introduction to the students of demography about these courses, but also what exactly is the need and requirement of these courses, and so that students of demography are able to contribute meaningfully as as potential labor in these areas. But once again, improving or introducing these niche courses will not improve the research in these courses. So it's also important to, I would say, very systematically move the focus of demographers from Asia, which is largely skewed towards public health at the present, to other facets of demography, like migration or aging or core computational demography, projections, theoretical work, or environmental demography, and all of these. But besides these also, we need to focus on policy research. To a large extent, I've seen that demographers are focusing on the causes and the consequences of population processes or public health issues, or even if it is economic demography, we are focusing more on the impacts or the reasons. But we focus very little on conducting social experiments that can transform such situations. And for the same, two things are necessary. First, policy research should be encouraged. So we need to have education about public policy, policy design, the theories of public policy. And secondly, we need to understand how to conduct social experiments. So proper training should be introduced at the courses, in the courses, I would say, and training should be provided of how to conduct social experiments successfully. What are the needs? What are the assumptions? How to formulate, how to think about social experiments, etc. And unless and until we have social experiments as a tool for the demographers, we will never be really able to come up with policies which are effective. So judging the effectiveness of policies, on one hand, we need monitoring and evaluation, but on the other hand, we also need these small experiments that can become the base for formulating these policies in the first place. Now, when we're talking about, now besides this, I also want to say that we also have to come up with robust courses which are very effective in communicating the latest developments in these niche courses also, like whether it is economic demography or environmental demography, we need to combine all of this information and pass it on to our students who are at the helm of entering into the research avenue. But for all of this to come true, our data dreams have to come true. And so what we need deeper, faster, frequent, and more accurate data for as much population as possible. So what we need is really real-time access of data and administrative data and other sources of data, but we have to move beyond survey research. And for the same, we will have to work closely with computer scientists, and we will have to impart data science skills like machine learning or big data analytics to our students, demography students, so that they can contribute successfully. But collecting real-time data or handling real-time data is just one side of the coin. For data dreams to come true, we also need the administrative units to bring in the administrative machinery that can trace this data and provide it to the demographers and provide access to everybody else who want to do research. But this will require, first, engagement of demographers at that administrative level. And for the same, we need to provide some kind of administrative training within our courseworks. And secondly, we need to provide ethical knowledge to the demographers so that they understand the difference between ethical and unethical use of data, which is a very fine line in reality. Towards the end, I would like to bring your focus back to basics. So existing population theories and like methodological, I would say, methodological innovations which happened in the past century or maybe in the early 2000s are well taught in our courses across Asia. But whatever new developments are taking place, which are taking place at a very rapid rate though, have to be communicated well. So while I do understand that it is difficult for a coursework to be so comprehensive and that such things need to be developed by the scholars according to their interests, but something like a lab training can definitely go a long way in helping the students to grasp it during their student days. So, for example, let's say if we want to establish an aging lab, so we can have scholars who are working on aging and maybe other age-related issues internationally or intercontinentally or within the country across different regions, and we can have like a laboratory with a proper organizational scheme, in which not only are they working on issues which are developing, but we're also compiling on the information that is going on throughout the world on aging issues. And so there is one compendium, one place for the scholar to reach and understand all of these developments, and at the same time have the exposure to discuss it with like experts from the field. And I think that kind of training can go a long way in providing the scholars the platform to understand where exactly the subject lies, what are the new developments, and where do we have to go forward from here. So towards the end, on a concluding note, what I want to say is that population issues of the 21st century are very different from the last century. And given the Sustainable Development Goals, population is going to be central to many of them. So training courses should be such that we are able to live up to the requirements of our field currently. And so therefore it should start somewhere with introducing newer developments to the students through lab training, conducting social experiments, bring on policy initiatives, provide proper data, especially through administrative engagement, and last but not the least, to improve the popularity of our subject throughout universities and even through schooling system, or just to improve overall standing of our subject in Asia. So thank you very much. Those were my few thoughts on the topic.
Thank you. Is there any quick questions for Mayanka of clarification? Okay. If not, we'll move on to our fourth presentation, the perspective from Europe. And we have Marie-Pierre Brignon-Boucher, who's at the Danish Center for Population Research at the University of Southern Denmark. So over to Marie-Pierre.
Ms. Bawa, would you mind allowing me to have host privileges?
We have a technical question here.
Well, I believe someone took the host privileges from me. It was Ayaga Bawa.
Bawa, can you check, I guess, in the participant place, is it?
Yeah, they just have to allow me to be a host.
I don't have it here in mine.
I'm not sure how that happened, but let me see whether, let me go to the participant list. See.
Paul, can you intervene?
What is the name?
Isabella. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see whether make a co-host.
That's it.
Yes. I think you are a co-host now.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marie-Pierre Bergeron-Boucher. I am replacing Jim Vopel, who unfortunately could not attend the conference. I am from Canada, and I did my bachelor and master in demography at the University of Montreal. So what did Jim ask me to give this talk? Well, I moved to Europe in 2012, where I did the European Doctoral School of Demography in Barcelona, and also did my PhD in Odense in Denmark. I also been the Dean of Student or Vice Dean for the EDSD in 2018-19, and I am currently working on creating a master program in demography in Denmark. The first thing I did when preparing this talk was to survey all the demographic teaching program in Europe from bachelor to PhD. Demographic training comes in many forms. It can be a full program or a specialization within a broader program. We have country-specific programs and also international schools. The list here focuses on programs that self-identify as demographic or with a specialization in demography. I did not include programs that offers a few demography courses. I probably missed a few programs mainly due to language barrier, but in total I found around 77 programs at different levels across 24 countries in Europe. Some countries offer more demographic training than others. For example, the UK has 12 programs, Germany 8, France 7, and Italy and Sweden 5. These countries are also more populous. The list does not include the international schools, which I will briefly mention later in the presentation. I will also mainly focus on the master programs, a little bit on the PhD, but it's important to point out that I found 4 bachelor programs, mainly multidisciplinary programs. I mean, demography, it's taught alongside another discipline, for example, statistics. So if we look a bit at the master programs to start with, I found 24 master programs across 16 countries. 16 programs are master in demography. 6 programs are master with a track in demography. For example, Lund University offers a master in economic growth, population and development, with a specialization track in economic demography. There are also 2 double masters, so one between Groningen in the Netherlands and Pompo Fabra in Spain, and one between Bamberg in Germany and Pompo Fabra again in Spain. Demography training isn't always offered by a department in demography. Departments of sociology, social sciences, economy, political sciences, and statistics also offer a master in demography with a track in demography. I will now say a few words about the European Doctoral School of Demography. So it is an 11-month sponsored program that is meant as a pre-doctoral school or first-year PhD. It is, however, possible to receive a master's degree from EDSD, depending on the host institution. So the program focuses on strengthening the quantitative and programming skills of the student. Students receive a full scholarship upon acceptance in the program, and there are 17 participant institutions across Europe, taking turns being the host of the program. So far, the program has been in Rostock, Paris, Lund, Barcelona, Warsaw, Rome, Odense, and again, Barcelona. So the EDSD starts with what used to be 6 weeks and now 8 weeks of preparatory courses, which are always taking place in Rostock. The students come from different backgrounds, and the prep course aims to put them on a more similar level. Afterward, the student moved to the host institution for the remaining 9 months to attend the core courses. The students are taught by experts in their field from all over Europe. Each week, a different teacher, generally from one of the participant institutions, come to teach at EDSD within one of the 6 courses. So there's 3 courses in EDSD that focuses mainly on methods, so statistical demography, mathematical demography, and modeling, simulation, and forecasting. There's 1 course on population data, and then 2 courses on population theories, processes, and issues. The students also have to produce a thesis by the end of the program. So this is only one example of a curriculum in demography. We can have a look at another curriculum. So here's an example from the Master in Population Studies from the Faculty of Spatial Sciences at the University of Groningen. So it is a 2 years master program. No curriculum looks the same, but there's generally at least 1 classes on demographic or statistical models. So here we have 2, advanced statistical analysis and life table and population projection. Also at least 1 classes on working with or managing data. So we have a class called working with data. And at least 1 classes on population theories and processes. So here we have 2, population health and place and migration, family and household. Here's another example from the Department of Sociology at the University of Stockholm. The department offers 1-year master program in demography. As mentioned, there's at least 1 class on methods, so basic demographic method, at least 1 class on data, which is an elective here, and at least 1 class on demographic processes. So do the graduates find jobs? It is hard to find statistics on the topic, but according to the program's website, so graduates with a master in demography generally find job in the public sector, including, for example, national statistical offices, ministries, or other government departments, local and regional authority. There's also find job in international organization, think tank, and private sector, including consulting and insurance companies. Some master students also really like academia and decide to continue to the next level and do a PhD. So demographers have many job opportunity in different sectors, but it seems that many jobs involve analysis of current population structure and dynamic as well as forecasting, which the curriculum generally covers. I did find some statistics for graduate from the EDSD program. As it is a doctoral school, it is no surprise to see that most graduates ended up doing a PhD. Among those who did the program from 2016, 56% are still currently doing their PhD, and 20% have completed their PhD and are working in research. A few found jobs outside academia, but all except 1 found a job related to demographic research or demographic analysis. Here are some statistics from older alumni. Thank you to Heiner Meyer for collecting and allowing me to present these statistics. So most of these students ended up doing research. This is a particularity of the program, and that's not the case from all other programs. Now a few words on PhD programs. So I found 48 institutions across 21 countries which supervise PhD student. 15 offers a PhD in demography, 13 offer a PhD with a specialization in demography. There are 9 universities that have a center for demographic studies with PhD student, but no demography department. So the student will receive a demographic training, but the diploma will not have demography on it. For example, we are the Danish Center for Population Studies at the University of Southern Denmark. We have many PhD students doing demographic research, but they will receive a diploma in social sciences. There are also 11 demographic research centers not based at the university. So it is similar to the previous category. The students will have a demographic training, but will have to be affiliated to a university which will deliver the diploma. 2 good examples of such center are the Max Planck Institute for Demographic Research in Rostock and the Institut National d'Études Démographiques in Paris. As for the master program, it is not always a demography department which offers the training. There is even more diversity at the PhD level. So we have demography, statistics, economy, social sciences, and sociology as in the master. But there's also more center or department related to health. A few words also on international doctoral schools. I already mentioned the EDSD earlier, but there's also the International Advanced Studies in Demography, which is a 1-year program for students already enrolled in a PhD programs or postdoc. The winter semester is in Rostock and the summer semester is somewhere else. Then there's also the International Max Planck Research School for Population Health and Data Science. It's a 3-year doctoral program hosted in Rostock in collaboration with 12 partner sites. And there's probably more that I missed. So what's next? There are many jobs opportunity in multiple sectors for demographers. Some jobs are perfect fit for demographers. A good example are working for population division in statistical offices. Now, I did not find training programs in all European countries. Is it because I did not look deep enough, or is it because there are none? If the latter, a question that can come to mind is who are actually doing the demographic analysis for these countries? Is there a need for a new program? In Denmark, for example, there's no master program in demography, and we are the only demographic center. We are starting interview with different employers to know if there is a need for demographers in their companies or institution. The few informal talks we had so far point that there is a need. The more formal interview will be performed in the winter. So we hope that those interviews will conquer what the informal talks pointed to. And we hope to start a master program in population studies here in Denmark. And finally, demography is often taught together with other disciplines, and there's many interdisciplinary centers related to demography. We all know that demographic changes present new challenges to society, and that the understanding and the capability to address these challenges requires insight from multiple disciplines. So demographers have experience with multidisciplinary research, but demography should not be seen as a subdiscipline within another program, but a well-established discipline which both learn from and inform on other disciplines. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your question.
Thank you very much. Is there any quick question of clarification? If not, we'll move on to our discussant, who is Professor Peter MacDonald. He's an emeritus professor at the Australian National University, where he was the head of the program there from 1996 to 2013. He's been involved in IUSSP. He was president of IUSSP for 2010 to 2013, and he's taught demographic methods in many things and contributed to demography in many ways. He's a senior demographer who can comment on what we've heard from our younger colleagues, the younger generation. So, Peter.
Thanks, thanks very much, Stan. Just to prove that I'm a senior demographer, I gave my first lecture in demography more than 50 years ago at the University of Indonesia. It's, I think, somewhat ironic that we're kind of discussing decline of the discipline in teaching terms at a time when the demographic issues are probably, you know, they've really come back onto the agenda. Back in my first association with IUSSP, I was asked to join the panel on teaching demography back in 1978. And the emphasis was very much on formal demography in that panel. And the people involved were very much formal demographers. And it's still the case today, of course, that the IUSSP has 2 courses on its website, 2 very, very excellent courses on its website, but they're both formal demography courses. So does that mean we're just formal? No. You know, it's ironic, as I say, that the discipline is seen maybe as declining in some places just at the time when it's emerging as very important. And the speakers, I think, all of them, they tended to agree on the importance of formal demography as a core, but also linking formal demography to the issues of the day or to important policy issues, and a range of them were provided. You know, there's low fertility, population aging, population mobility, climate change, inequality, COVID now, and diversity, ethnicity, urbanization, so on. So all of these issues are central, important, and there's always going to be a need for demographers, you know, because of the significance of these issues. How many demographers do we need? Well, you know, mainstream demographers, demography will always be a relatively small discipline. I think IUSSP's had, you know, close to 2,000 members for the last 50 years. It hasn't grown. That brings you to a notion that maybe we should focus on quality rather than upon quantity, training a relatively small number of people, but training them exceptionally well. But that often around the world doesn't work because funding tends to be based on the number of students that you have and not upon the quality of what you're actually producing or the importance of what you're producing, just upon the number that you're producing, the number of students who come and knock on your door. So there was mention of, I think how you teach demography in any particular setting is going to vary, depending upon the particular circumstances. So IIPS in Mumbai is a big institution. It's a university of demography. You can do a lot in that kind of circumstance. And then the Europeans got together and produced the European School, which was an excellent idea to deal with, you know, the small nature of programs in individual countries. But again, it required funding, that people had scholarships to go to the European School. It required funding. In other circumstances, you know, you're not going to sustain a master's degree in demography in a relatively small environment. Because just the number of students won't be there. And in those circumstances, maybe you need to be taking the opportunity to embed formal demography, and not kind of Mickey Mouse demography, embed real formal demography courses in broader training programs. So we did this at ANU back in 2007 when we invented a Master of Social Research degree in the demography department. So it was a broader program, but we embedded formal courses in demography within it. And with the attempt to capture people's imaginations who took those courses. And it is really important, I think, to try to capture the imagination of students once they are doing demography. And I think if you stick to purely formal courses, you're not going to capture their imagination unless they're a group of statisticians. But when I first got into the field of demography, I did a one-year training course with the head of demography at ANU at that time, Professor Mick Borry. And he essentially just gave me stuff to read. But the books that he selected were brilliant. And I was captured. I just found it so fascinating. And Borry was a historian, and some of the books that he gave me to read were about demography and history, and I found that just plain fascinating. And from that day onwards, I've been linked to the field, and have. So capturing imagination, I was then lucky to, again, that my PhD supervisor, Jack Caldwell, was a person who linked demography to anthropology, bringing anthropological dimensions into the field of demography, understanding culture. And I had him as a PhD supervisor. Immediately afterwards, I went to work in Indonesia for quite a while. Indonesia is a fantastically diverse country with different cultures. You have to understand those cultures to say anything about their demography. And so you need to be looking at the issues and how demography can fit with those issues, as most of the speakers said. And in doing that, capturing the imagination of the students, that they feel that this is an important issue. It's an issue that they want to pursue for the rest of their careers. And of course, doing PhD in some kind of exciting area of demography. The training, beyond the formal demography, going from the statement that was quoted from Ron Lee about explaining individual behaviour, that certainly has become very important, I think, in demography. And a lot of demographers work in sociology departments or economics departments, essentially as quantitative social scientists, and trying to explain behaviour, which is often demographic behaviour, using surveys. And so surveys are much more common today. They're available. It's essential that demographers get training in survey data analysis so that they can link. They can look at the determinants of individual behaviour, but what you look at, what you decide to look at, is determined by the macro side very largely. It's so you've got climate change as a kind of macro issue, and so you want to if you want to look at climate change and explain individual behaviour, you get to it by the fact that climate change is happening, that it's a macro issue, or there is an economic issue, or there is a social issue that is well known. So, and it's often the formal demography that is telling you that, that this is an issue. It's the formal demography that's telling you that this is an issue. Then you can move to individual level analysis to examine its determinants or macro and micro modeling the consequences of particular forms of demographic behaviour. Going back to the IOSSP website, I can find 2 courses in formal demography. Same 2 courses would have been, I taught them back in the 1970s. If those courses had been there at that time, my teaching would have been better because they're very good courses. However, if you go further down in the IOSSP website and look at the work of the panels, the research panels, then you come up with words like big data, digital demography, agent-based modeling, Bayesian probability, which is not new, but machine learning, machine actionable vocabularies I've just come across. And I suppose the future demographer is going to need to know about all of these things. But it's very important in the end not to get too removed from the realities of everyday life and maintaining the realities of everyday life in teaching. And theories, of course, social theories, economic theories that are related to everyday life. And not too far away from learning by observing, I think, is throughout my career, I've always been heavily involved in learning by observing. And I was once the head of a research agency which conducted a lot of field studies in Australia, this is, and a lot of surveys. But I always went out myself to do a couple of interviews in every survey, every one that they ever conducted, because that gave me a feeling for what the issues were all about. Of course, testing the questionnaire, of course, as well. And in recent times, I've been wandering around villages in Indonesia, interviewing older people about their lives. So that I think you need to not get too removed. If you're teaching formal courses, and maybe the theory is pretty formal too, don't get too far removed from everyday life and understanding it yourself through observation. So I think I'll end it with that, so we have lots of time for questions.
Thank you very much. So now is the time for open discussion. And if you raise your hand, I can call on you in order and we won't have people unmuting same time. But otherwise, we could try that. Let's see, anybody want the floor to reactions from what we've heard? Quiet audiences today. Okay, 2 raised hands. Oh, I don't see them. Why is that? Okay, I don't see. Okay, Jacques, Amina. And also,
thank you.
Do speak slowly, everyone, because we do have translation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for this session, very interesting session for demographer. I have 2 questions. I think the question is is for all the intervenants, all the people who presented. So how could we respond to low interest in the formal demography? We cannot ignore that the formal demography is not attractive, is no more attractive. So what could we do? There are increased invasion of public health specialists, epidemiologists, sociologists, and economists in the area of demography. So what should we do? That is the first question. The second one is close to the first one, is what kind of skills, what are the skills we should expect the future demographer to have concretely? What skills we need to expect from people who want for the future? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure the best way to have our panelists respond, but I'll call maybe first on Mayanka. Since I know you have a lot of formal demography there at IPS.
Well, as I argued.
Whoops, Bawa first. Okay, go ahead, Bawa.
Oh, no. I thought.
Go ahead. Go ahead, then we'll have Mayanka.
Okay, well, that's That's a very important question, and I have noted that, you know, it appears formal demography is not no more emphasized in a lot of the places, but I think it's critical, and it is critical because demographers, although you have epidemiologists, economists, statisticians who have come into the field, but our techniques and methods are unique. And they are unique. Their uniqueness requires that we continue to, emphasize this in our training. Of course, we cannot shy away from the fact that other topical issues have become important, and therefore we will need to interrogate them. But we need to stay focused to our discipline. Otherwise, the discipline is going to disappear and is going to be hijacked by other non-demographers who claim to be demographers and doing the things that we are supposed to traditionally be doing. In terms of how we continue to make sure that this is kept alive, I think that programs, I know that there's donors are not necessarily very interested in funding programs that are not technically demographic in nature, just focusing on methods. I had discussions with Tom Moultrie, and he argued that, look, they have tried to emphasize that, but it appears they are almost at the brink of closing their program because they've emphasized so much in the technical demography to the exclusion of the non-technical areas, and no donor is prepared to fund them. So I would argue that if we make our techniques and they relevant to all the soft issues that we are talking about, we should be able to attract funding. So the issue is about applying the techniques which are very, central to demography and core to our field, to emerging areas, and making sure that these produce results that will be attractive to donors. Okay. And once we do that, we should be able to remain relevant. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Vanessa, I guess, first.
Thanks. I want to just use this opportunity to react also to Peter's discussion. I think that, first of all, I disagree with this feeling that we're being hijacked by other disciplines. I think this is one of the advantages that we have, and the fact that population phenomena is so complex, the fact that we have a very singular characteristic on which we can also feed on other disciplines to enrich what we are doing. So I don't think we should see this in an adversarial manner, like a tug of war with other disciplines in order to emphasize our own. I really think that this is part of its core, the fact that we can feed upon other disciplines. So, and I think the issue that this questioning has come to the forefront again reminds me of the IPC plenary in 1995, where Guillaume Wunsch said, God has chosen to give the easy problems to physicists, or why demographers need theory. And this discussion of the lack of theory that also made so much demography rely on other fields. And I think this is where we create this issue of like making these differences. But I think that the implication of this, or when we discuss formal demography, and when Peter said as well, like to touch on the imagination of students, I really think that formal demography is not only about the mathematical part of it, it's about reconciling the theoretical rigor that we have with the empirical complexity. That's the translation from the micro and macro that we have the ability to do, and that's our main power. It's also one saying that Kiefertz had in this the preface in 1977 that says, what we do is that our answers are not always common sense. And we have instances on which our intuition has to be adjusted. So the fact that demography has the ability of adjusting what seems common sense but it's not. Sometimes we have counterintuitive results. And let us not forget that one way to push also this imagination, we are dealing with live curves. So when we look at those shapes, they're alive, they're people. When we're doing informal demography, we're already doing people, we're incorporating this, and we have things that are connected to behavior as well. So let us not forget, for example, the model life tables or Age at Marriage by Ernst Cole and Colin McNeil models, where we basically have a convincing behavioral model that closely fits the observed age distribution of marriage, which when we think about it, it's something that's behavioral, it's a topic of sociology, of anthropology, but we can provide a model that closely fits the age distribution. And we could give many other examples. So I really think to ignite this passion again as well, to say, look, the power that demographic methods have, they're not only simply measuring things randomly, they're really capable of doing this connection. So this is just my reaction.
Thank you. Mayanka, did you want to get in before we take next question, comment? You're muted.
Just one thing I just want to add towards the end. I think Vanessa kind of, she talked about it in detail and very beautifully, but just one thing is that, answering the first question on how to generate interest in formal demography. First thing is that, yeah, definitely we cannot identify or provide like box what is formal demography. We have to understand that it expands right from our calculations to our theories and everything that Vanessa just told us, but also it is about who is benefiting from this research. For a long time, demographers have always handed over their research, and it's always been for the government. I mean, we have never really tried to privatize our skills. Okay, so imagine using what Vanessa said. Imagine doing that for the business houses, the corporate houses. They are the ones with the power in terms of in terms of monetary power. They're the ones who can fund the subject. They're the ones who can expand the subject to another level. So I think that is where overall, whether it's Europe, whether it's US, whether it's Asia, we're all lacking in connecting our skill sets to the business houses, and I think they can benefit a lot from the skill sets that we do have, but we have to somehow find that bridge, the connection. We have to prove that we can provide the things that you can't see. A simple person with an MBA degree or somebody who's just doing some plain market research is not going to provide you a long-term perspective as to how to go with your business. And something like that, I think, is going to draw in a lot of funding into our subject, and it's going to improve the acceptance of formal demography. It's going to improve, I would say, like, the fact that it'll start getting taught in business schools in other areas. And that's how I think, we're just going to bounce back as a subject.
Thank you. I see Vladimir and Mohammed both have their hand raised. Mohammed, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Stan, and thanks to the ISSB for organizing this important session, and thanks Peter for his insightful comments, as I'm a proud student of Peter, and what I've learned is through him and the instructions that we've been given over the last 20 years so far. What have been said by our speakers, I think I agree with all of them, that we need to discuss the changing environment of our societies and the need for changing or adapting to the new environment. As Peter said, there are different daily issues that we have to respond, and to be able to respond, we have to understand them and then respond them, and then address some of the issues that both society and policymakers want to get some answers. The other issue that was mentioned was the complexity of population issues, again, that our speakers mentioned. And it's interesting to me that you brought us different colleagues, and particularly new generation of demographers from different continents, and they are more or less saying that we have to We have to strengthen the discipline of demography, keep or sustain the demography within the different faculties in academia, and change it at the same time. Interestingly, there was a session at the APA, Asian Population Association, for the same topic, and we were asked to give comments. And I want to just mention a few words on that. That the points that I made there was that we need 4 new T's in Asian demography. And these include new topics, because we are facing new issues, low and lowest fertility, population and environment. That was again, was said by colleagues, and new forms of family. So we need to focus on new topics. We need new theories. Although it was mentioned that we have to teach the old sort of theories, there are different topics that we have to explain by new theories. Some of the areas that used to be a place of very high fertility, now they are experiencing very low fertility, their family has changed, etc., etc. And so we need a combination of macro and micro approaches in demography, as Bilary said, to explain sort of these issues. We need new techniques, new methods. We have to be innovative. So putting different data, compilation of old, traditional and new data. We need new methodologies, including multidimensional, for example, projections, measuring migration flows, spatial demography, that these fortunately were sort of being taken by new generation of demographers at the ISSP conference during this week. And then we need new training. So new training centers, online teaching, multidisciplinary training, hybrid training center.
Oops. Okay, I think we lost Mohammed. Over to Vladimir.
Excellent, excellent panel, excellent session. You told us about the past, you told us about the future. Thank you very much, all of you, for your vision. My question is actually to Stan Becker. Why to him? Because at PAA, IUSSP, wherever he can, he will put a session on what is the future of demography teaching. What is the future of formal demography? So my question to you, Stan, is what have you learned after all these sessions that you have organized? Come on, share your knowledge. We want to know what you are doing with all this information. Thank you all.
Well, actually, this was a slight distraction. I was asked to do this because Tom Legrand knew that I was working on, for US, we have major problem because the teaching of demography has declined significantly. It's certainly my own university. We have very little informal demography. And we're thinking about maybe the European model. And it's not easy to put together, but after this is finished, I hope to continue working on that so we can have students trained in formal demography other than just 1 or 2 places where it happens now. Thank you for the question. I think Leora wanted to say.
Sorry, Esther, I was disconnected. I can finish my words.
Yes, very quickly, because we have other people in line.
We need to focus on 3 things. Public demography, we have to sort of communicate with our public. Secondly, there was the meeting actually at this conference also on political demography. We need to invest in that. And finally, policy design. Our colleagues mentioned that we know many things about population analysis, projections, etc., but we know little about population policy, and that's something that we need to focus on too. Okay. Thank you, and sorry for taking long. Thank you.
I know we've come to time, but I understand we can keep going, so we will keep going, and if we don't get cut off, I think Leora had a comment, please.
Yes, I'll try to make this go very quickly. So thank you to all the presenters. I think a common focus has been what can these programs offer, but it hasn't touched on that. There's an issue, I think, in formal demography, especially of self-selection, of who ends up studying demography, and who do the questions appeal to? Who does the existing research appeal to? So as Vanessa said, it's not just about mathematical rigor, it's about linking that mathematical rigor and formal methods to, for example, social phenomena. And I think there is a large population where they might, people select out and go into other academic disciplines where they can see they can relate to themselves more. And a very short example of that would be with my research that focuses on mortality in Canada and Indigenous populations. I was speaking to a friend who happens to be Indigenous and is in a legal field, and she asked me, well, would you be able to link mortality to residential school attendance? And my thought was, I don't know. And then I said, oh yeah, I'm sure there's a way I could do that with, with the data. I would have to look closer. And then I said, well, I don't, there's this contextual knowledge that I lack. I could make a model, but I think, this needs additional expertise in demography. This needs some perspectives I don't think I would be able to offer despite my skill set. So yeah, that is my short TED talk on the issue. So how can we appeal to people like my friend who end up in a legal field rather than a demographic field, but still have these questions?
Okay, thank you. Marie-Pierre, did you want to say something, or we'll go back to Peter? I don't see other hands raised. If you'd like to raise your hand and say something else, please raise your hand so I can see you. Otherwise, over to Marie-Pierre.
I think there's one question, and then I can talk afterward. If I can give the floor to Susanna, I think.
Susanna has a question.
Oh yeah,
yes,
thank you very much thank you very much for the question. That's very good. I agree with the things that were being said, but just putting something else on formal demography is that, or lab, as Mayanka was saying, we need more lab, and I would say we need more lab on data production. I feel that demographers are very far away from the data production from the NSOs or even other institutions that are producing data, even producing the big data. So how could we involve students in teaching, having labs within places that are producing data so we can be closer and actually later in life influence how data are being produced, because we have been taught how to do that.
Thank you. Marie-Pierre?
So hi, yeah, there's a lot of nice discussion happening. So just to come back, so there was a lot of discussion. I don't think there was any specific question to me, but so there's a lot of talk about formal demography and the interdisciplinary nature of demography, and if we're afraid that demography will disappear within another discipline. So first of all, we have to be aware that there's no or very little bachelor in demography. So we all come from a different background. So there's a lot of people having a bachelor in economy, in public health, in statistics, and actuarial science. So we all come back with our own background, and then we all become interested in demography for a given reason. And I think this is a strength of demography, actually, because demographic challenges is in every aspect of society. It affects healthcare system, it affects pension system, it affects how many schools we need. So having this interdisciplinary background, I think, to build on is very interesting. At the same time, we're afraid of demography becoming part of another discipline. And given that we're so diverse in our discipline, I'm personally not that afraid of it. And also because demography brings something very specific to the table and that other disciplines do not cover. And I think this is the method, the formal demography. And this is demography is mathematical and methodological at its core. And what demographers do with this method is diverse. A lot of us like contributing more to the model, but a lot of people like using those models to do the research here and there. And the method we teach and we learn is not covered by any other disciplines. Like I mentioned, we're trying to establish a master program here. And one of the things we have to show is that we are not competing with any other discipline. And when I was trying to see which discipline is teaching, for example, cohort component model, I haven't found any courses covering that from any discipline. Also, when I'm looking, during my PhD, we had a class for all public health PhD student, and the teacher asked, what is life expectancy? And then asked me to keep quiet. And nobody no PhD student in public health could say what was life expectancy. Mainly due to this, they don't understand the difference between period and cohort. So we really are unique, even if we work with other disciplines or come from different disciplines. So I'm personally not afraid to be lost in any other discipline. And I really hope we can strengthen this. And also in terms of why there's a low interest in formal demography, or we have difficulty finding people interested into that. So this is also a difficult question. And I think one of the main points is that demography is a small field and a lot of people don't know what we do and what demography is. Again, in my research and starting that program, I look at other programs that are strong in statistics and method. And there's a program in data science here, for example, and they had 200 applicants for 50 spots. So there's students interested in actually learning method and programming and apply it in relevant, like something relevant for society. So I think the question is can we attract those people? How can we be more visible as well? Again, we're a small field, but it's an open question if you have comment.
Thank you. Marie-Pierre, I might ask you directly as follow-up to what Vladimir asked me. Do you think there's how the US could copy the European school situation to have a degree where people from various institutes came together, like in the European school for advanced training?
Oh, I don't know how the US situation that well. So the European doctoral program also started for collaboration of different demographic institute, and so they have already a lot of demography program in place, and so people were very keen on having this extra one, but there's a strong basis to start with. So I don't know from what you're saying in the US, you have more scarce, like they don't have that much program or demography training program. So I think it would be your first challenges would be to find institution ready to do that. But maybe some institution that wants a demography program but don't have the funding would be interested of sending their student to those.
Yep. Sounds good.
Yeah, so it's
okay. Other persons want to raise your hand. I think Vanessa wants to say something again.
No, I just wanted to add this to Marie-Pierre said, because I also had this feeling when I was teaching Brazil to public health, the same thing. So it was just interesting what she said. And I also wanted to add that I think for younger generations, what I feel sometimes as well scares them from formal demography per se is not only the heavy mathematical part, it's just like you said, the fact that it's very small. And usually when you go to the conferences or when you interact with someone, usually the formal demographers are these very senior researchers who are very well established and who we are still replicating the same thoughts up until now. So it feels like very, very restricted in the sense that you get kind of, scared away from trying to work on it. And I just wanted to advertise a bit this formal demography working group that I built with Monica Alexander and Rio, where in a way it was an attempt to do this, like to discuss with other younger groups as well, what exactly is formal demography and how it's just it's also like a conceptual part of demography. It discusses also the main concepts of it. And I think this also helps if you try to make it a bit less scary in the sense of the gatekeeping, not only in the sense of what it is, but also to make it more user-friendly, so to speak.
Thank you. Peter, would you like to add something or summarize?
Yeah, I think we don't forget PhD programs. I think that it's possible, I think, to get people from other master's degrees, other disciplines, who actually don't have necessarily a lot of training in demography, and capture them at the PhD level, where I guess that's what's been done in the US, but it doesn't succeed all that well, as you were saying, Stan. But I think it is possible, to capture people at the highest level, at the PhD level. And in my case, I was largely self-taught, actually. As I said, I did a course, which was a one-year reading course. That's the only course I've ever had in demography. And so I taught myself formal demography from the textbooks. So I taught myself all kinds of demography. And it can be done so long as you are enthusiastic about the field.
Thank you. Okay, who would like the last word? Anybody want to raise your hand? Vladimir wants to say something. Go ahead.
Goodwill, and as Peter McDonald said, a lot of imagination. That's what we need. We are always going to be there. If there is a population phenomena, a demographer has to answer it. And that's it.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all for your attendance, and to be continued, obviously, and thank you for all our contributions.
Thank you so much.
You.